Hello and welcome to Produced By. Just quickly before we begin, if you enjoy the show, please consider supporting it by joining our Patreon. You can choose from a list of memberships and will receive some exciting rewards. Thank you, and back to the episode. Hello, Fernando. It's a pleasure to welcome such a legend like you are. So thank you for joining and welcome to the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I've been jealous and I had to ask you if I could be part of it. Instead of being invited. It's fine. It's okay. It's awesome. I'll be having a lot of fun listening to the interviews.
I was very pleased. So thank you very much for joining. And I'm sure people will find out why you are such a legend just in a few minutes. So can you, Fernando, please introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Fernando. I am from Brazil originally. I currently am in between jobs after a contract as an asset supervisor at DNAG. I work in visual effects for the last over 10 years, actually. But yeah, that's the basics. I believe we will get into the details as we speak.
Yeah. So can we start with your background? Where are you from? What was your childhood like?
Yeah, I was born actually in southern Brazil. It's a state called Rio Grande do Sul, and a city that I was born is Caxias do Sul. It's a state that it touches Uruguay and Argentina as well. I was born actually when I was born in October, it was snowing. It was very fun. A lot of people don't think that snows in Brazil, but there are certain parts that used to snow. And I have photos of me as a baby, kind of doing little angels or devils, whatever you choose, on the snow. Yeah,
And you said
it's a beautiful
snow, so it doesn't snow there anymore, or not that frequently?
Global warming, right? It's global warming is a tough one. Yeah, it doesn't snow anymore. Like, it does sometimes. There are a couple of places that are quite high in Brazil that, depending on how it is in winter, it snows. But it would snow like in the city. You know, it's now unfortunately it doesn't anymore. Even when I was born, was already way less snow than what it was like 80 years ago or something like that. Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful place. My father's family is from there. My mom, she's from São Paulo, where I'm actually calling you from. And then they ended up meeting in São Paulo, then moving to South Brazil. Actually, they met in South Brazil. And I grew up until I was 8 years old. I was living in Rio Grande do Sul. I think that between 8 or 9 years old, there was a gigantic migration in Brazil in search for work opportunity, work quality, education towards São Paulo, which is a gigantic financial capital. It's also a great place for study, and that kind of happens early 90s and throughout the 90s until today still happens a little bit, which is a lot of people looking for opportunity to have a better life. Coming to São Paulo, and my parents, they're very humble as well, and they were looking for that opportunity. So my dad took a job, I believe, and then when he got here, he didn't have that job anymore. There was some issues, but we moved here, and I remember the beginning. It was very interesting because we didn't have money. They pretty much rented. They paid like for the first 3 months of rent, and then we were pretty much eating like bread, ham, and cheese, and drinking Coca-Cola for breakfast, lunch, and dinner sometimes. Yeah, it was a very tough beginning. It was a tough beginning, but then my father and my mom, they kind of managed to work their way through. I grew up with a brother as well. I have a sibling. He's 1 year older. And we got along quite well. I used to love watching cartoons on TV. That's kind of where a lot of my passion for what we do started, as a lot of people. But yeah, my childhood was, was I think that is the typical childhood of a lot of people, like parents trying to make your life better, trying to make their life better, while trying to shield their children from the world and the realities of the world. So as a child, I knew that there was something wrong. You kind of always have that feeling. You hear the discussions, you kind of see that there's something missing here, or there are better days and worse days, and then you kind of just grew up in that environment. But it was a great environment. My mom and my dad, they always done a great job caring for education. I grew up, I studied in public school in Brazil for many years. And then my mom, she went to university, she got her diploma, and then she started teaching in a private school. And then I had the opportunity to move to the private school under a scholarship. The scholarship was based on the fact that I could only get 10s or A's. I couldn't take any lesser grades, or else the scholarship would be canceled. So it was, in that sense, I feel like that's where my pressure started to kind of to exist more drastically for me. It was the first time that I had a responsibility over something. Like it was a really nice, great school. And it was the first time that my parents kind of put a little bit of pressure on me, because, hey, we cannot afford this, but this is the best education we can provide you right now through the scholarship. So you and your brother kind of need to get your shit together and kind of keep doing the right thing. But in a very loving way. They were very understanding. And that was the first time that I had contact with English.
With what?
It was the first time, and it was terrifying. First time I had contact with English.
Oh yeah, I see.
Because in public school, I never learned English. English at that time wasn't part of the curriculum. And at the private school, I joined the private school, I think it was 7th grade or 6th grade or something like that. And they had English since the beginning. So I had to study from the book, like without teachers or anything, trying to learn English, to join the class and head towards English. And it was very traumatizing because it was super incredibly hard. English wasn't a thing. It wasn't there. There was like internet wasn't that thing. Like you would pretty much listen to music, but you would just like mouth it, but not necessarily understand the meaning of the words. You would just enjoy the music for the whole complete product that music is, but not necessarily paying attention to the lyrics, because I didn't recognize the words. And then I kind of had to start paying attention to that study. That it was very stressful. My first contact with English was very stressful. I remember that I almost failed a few tests in English. I kind of had to. I was lucky enough that some of the teachers, they actually gave me second chances, because they knew that I never studied. So that was really good. But it was an interesting first contact with English.
And can you say, how hard is it for someone who speaks Brazilian language? How hard it is to learn English? Because, for example, it will be easier for someone who knows other Germanic languages, but when it comes to Brazilian, Portuguese. Oh my God.
No, it's okay. I feel like it really depends on the person more than the language itself, unless it's like a language in which the structure is absolutely different. Like you have Japanese, Chinese, Arabic. They're like the way you write and see, it's different. But like for Portuguese, to be honest, English, from a purely technical point of view, Portuguese is very complex. Like even time tenses have more time tenses than usual. It's really complicated. We have so many rules as well. I would say that from a technical perspective, it isn't necessarily that hard to learn English. I think that for me, and I think that for a lot of people that I met over the years, it's just the usual. It depends on how old you are, right? Because at certain ages, you are just a sponge, and you just absorb information. Your brain's not set in ways, And when I had to learn English, my brain was very much set in ways already. And breaking that barrier, like thinking in English instead of just trying to translate things. The whole thing, that was the complicated part. I don't necessarily believe that English as a language, English is very complex if you want to make it complex. but the base of English for having like minimum to medium communication is not that complicated. That was my perception, but I believe like if you the hardest part is just like understanding the rules and how that goes, right? Like right now I'm actually trying to read as many books in Portuguese because on my first week here in Brazil, a couple of weeks ago, some people thought that I wasn't Brazilian because my Portuguese from Brazil has an accent, and the way I've been structuring sentences is in a way that it works for English, but not necessarily Portuguese. So I'm kind of mixing both languages, and that's been happening for a long time. Yeah, but yeah, see, everyone creates their own language, at some point. But yeah, I would say I always tell people when a lot of Brazilian ex-students and people that I know, they're always afraid of pursuing opportunities abroad because of language differences. And I always say I feel like you can study as much as you want, but at the end of the day, is throwing yourself at a circumstance in which you're forced to learn, positively or negatively, right? Like you have amazing stories from refugees. Therefore, also stories of people like myself. I had opportunity to study before and then get there and still get slapped in the face because you kind of need to learn, like you need to learn how to go to the doctor, which is something people don't actually teach you in class, like how to describe the symptoms of a cold, or how to describe that you're itchy somewhere. I don't know. It's I feel like I always tell people to don't let an opportunity to go away just because you are unsure of language. There are many, many ways to put yourself out there and learn. And I do find that I don't know if it's I don't I've been out from Brazil for 10 years. I don't know if the perception has changed. But I do find that Brazilian people, a lot of Portuguese speakers here, they're super afraid and they assume that you need to be like fluent in the language, in English, for instance, specifically, to go work in the States or Canada or England or whatever English speaker country. And I find that those countries, the majority of people, they're very embracing. There are some prejudices. I feel like there are always like a couple of people who are absolutely dicks about things. I have been made fun of in meetings with supervisors about accent or the wrong way of using a word or something like that. But I feel like if I have to say something, I try to tell everyone is like communication. There's so many levels of communication, and expressing yourself takes time, right? But it's important to take that step forward and just try. I find that I remember that one of the things that I struggled the most in English when I moved to Canada was expressing feelings and, desires, anxieties, fears, expressing like emotions through words and sentence because they're a different language. They don't have the same weight. They don't have the same, like, you know what I mean, right? Like they don't have the same value. Even cursing, I tend to curse more in English because of the curse is different. It's not the same as the weight of the curse that I know. So you kind of let that go, And then it takes time speaking the language to understand those nuances and also have a relationship with that language, right? Like so that's why I think you need to give yourself time to go out there. You need to talk. You need to challenge yourself. You need to get frustrated. And all those things, use all those things that kind of sound negative as a way to feel that desire to learn that thing as well. I feel like I talk about this with my partner quite often, and we have both a very similar sense. Like when you go to a different country, you need to learn how they think, how they feel as well. I feel like that's the bare minimum respect that is owned. Like we just did a trip around Europe, and we will always kind of try to say hi, hello, thank you, try to understand the language itself and try to communicate, say you're sorry that you can't when you jump into like English or something like that. But yeah, I do feel like a lot of people have that fear on language barrier.
I was gonna say that I absolutely agree, because before I moved to London, I was also afraid of my level of English, if it will be, I don't know, sufficient, or if it's enough. But after being here, I think it's the last thing you should worry about, because when I tell someone and they say my English isn't good, so I say, is the really, don't worry about it. There are so many people. Not everyone has perfect English, and there is nothing to be ashamed of, because it's not your native language. There's like people from
Yeah.
all around the world. It's not their native language either, and it's not a big deal. You will always communicate somehow, and if you immerse yourself in the language, you will learn it by practicing. So it was a great point.
Yeah. Yeah. It is interesting. I do feel like there's a lot of self pressure when it comes to expressing. There's a lot of not wanting to deal with that frustration for many reasons. Some of them are good, some of them are bad, but yeah, it's
And
a
I
very
think
good point. And now I have.
what's
Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say, I think what's also important, just to show your effort, because when people see that you are trying, they're usually happy to help you, or happy to see the effort that you are making. So really, there is nothing to
Yeah,
be ashamed of.
absolutely. Yeah, I remember like when we have artists that are junior artists from a different country, and that they're already stressed because they're junior,
Mm-hmm.
and they're already overstressed because they don't speak the language, but they're trying. Like, we need to be patient. We need to, hey, just take your time, take a deep breath. If you want, like, let's go to someone else and then we can come back to you later.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's a process. People need to
Yeah.
be people need to be more gentle with themselves and with other people. I feel like that's
Mm-hmm.
something that definitely needs to happen more often.
Yeah.
It's been hard sometimes in a capitalist world, but I do think that the effort, as you mentioned, is a very, very good point.
Mhm. And I was curious, as you said before, when you went to public school and they didn't teach you English, was it because they were teaching different foreign language, or they weren't teaching foreign languages at all?
So when I went to public school at that time, they were not teaching any other foreign language. It
Mm-hmm.
was Portuguese, and that was all. I do not know nowadays if English is part of the public school curriculum. I do know that a lot of private schools here do teach English as a second language. I think that some of them might even go for Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I would say that I am not qualified to answer that in a certainty.
Yeah. I was
But
just curious.
yeah, at my time when I was learning at the school I was, definitely English wasn't a thing. I don't know if maybe English they're gonna start teaching English like a few years after because I was so young. Maybe they were not teaching English at an early stage at the time. I don't know.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
also, I wanted to ask you where you were growing up, because I've never been to Brazil. So just to imagine, what did it look like? Um, I've got image of Brazil just from the movies. So was it like you would say, regular city like London, or maybe not London, but like a regular city? Or, for example, I remember from, it's going to be stereotypes, so I apologize, but from Fast and Furious, there was in Rio, jumping from, I don't know if they call it slums or something like that, like very poor people, or what kind of place was it?
Careful with the Fast and Furious reference because I believe that some of the things that they show in the movie saying that is Brazil is actually not Brazil.
Really?
Yeah, I think that they shot that. Yeah, I think that they shot it, or it's some parts of the states or Mexico.
Oh, I didn't know.
Even the Portuguese that they're using is actually Spanish.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Spanish actors. Yeah, it's a whole thing. That is a whole thing. It's
Mm-hmm.
very poorly represented. There are a couple of scenes that I believe that they are from Rio, the favelas. Where I grew up in South Brazil was actually at that time was very green.
Mm-hmm.
It was a big city. It was a big city, not as big and large and populated with buildings as London. Nowadays, it's closer, but we had a lot of greenery as well,
Yeah.
which was really nice. We used to live in this little hill, and it was a fairly new neighborhood. It was kind of around the main downtown area. It was cheaper. It was easier to build things. It was more isolated as well, but it was beautiful. We could see a lot of the city from there. It was still a growing place.
Yeah.
And when I moved to São Paulo, I definitely remember having a shock because São Paulo in the 90s was going through the whole process of changing from houses to buildings, right? São Paulo used to be a relatively like didn't have that many buildings on early states. Like it had more than the average in Brazil, but nowadays it's like a lot of buildings. It's like a ridiculous amount of buildings. But São Paulo still has some greenery around. There are some neighborhoods that unfortunately lack green, but there are certain areas that you can definitely have more. But I would say that São Paulo, it's closer to a London vibe. London has the history of like over 500 years of existence written on the streets, whereas São Paulo is a fairly young city compared to London, so you don't have that much history, but you still see some of the colonial style buildings here and there. We have like some marks in the city. You can still see some of the different architectures. But São Paulo is also going through the same process that the majority of the big cities are going through, which is overpopulation, demolition of old houses to build studio buildings. It's kind of all over the place. But it is definitely like from where I am, I can still see some trees around. The city has been trying to increase the amount of trees. When I left São Paulo for the first time over 10 years ago to go live in Canada, I recall having less trees than now that I'm back.
So it's a good
which is good, at least for me. Yeah, exactly. Like the people who live here don't notice that much. But I was personally surprised and quite happy that we have more trees than I can remember, at least. I don't know if it's just my memory playing games on me, but yeah, it's definitely nice. But I love São Paulo. São Paulo is like it's amazing. It's amazing, convoluted, complex, multicultural place in which, yeah, it's just fun to be around. Like people are very live. The metro system is amazing. It's just fun to be around. There's like tons of bars, theaters, movies. There's so many there's so much to do here. It's one of the things that it's interesting as someone who wants to live in a place. I find personally my taste São Paulo much more interesting than Rio. Rio has the whole beachy side section, like it's more touristic. It's pretty. You can definitely see all the things. It's nice. But São Paulo, you can drive around and get into like woods and forests. It's also quite nice.
That was actually my next.
Brazil is
That was my next question. If you can make a little comparison between São Paulo and Rio, because I believe that most of the people know the Rio. So what would be some differences?
Yeah, it's hard to compare. Like it's such a different culture, right? Like there's even certain, like culturally speaking, there is a rivalry between people from Rio and people from São Paulo. It's one of those things, like Rio is a gorgeous place. The people are awesome as well, but it's just, imagine a West Coast lifestyle versus a East Coast lifestyle. That's kind of what happens. Like São Paulo is, because it has this title of financial capital, everyone comes here for work. It has a go, go, go vibe to it. And Rio, they slow down things. They enjoy the beach. They still do a lot of work. Like it's not like they don't work, but there's a different speed and sense of urgency. There's also the size is different. Like São Paulo is much larger. Rio, it has a lot of density, and also culturally speaking, the relationship that Rio has with the favelas, there are a lot of treats that are different from both places. Not only geographically is different, the cultural is different. But it's interesting that we kind of like, it's a 4-hour, 6-hour drive from São Paulo, and you get into Rio, and it's absolutely different. Even the accent that we speak is very different. Portuguese from Rio and Portuguese from São Paulo, they have very different accents.
So
which is
can you
also is a
recognize
big tell.
based on accent where they are from?
Yeah, you can recognize. Yeah, Brazil. Each section in Brazil has very specific different accents. Even the accent that I grew up with in South Brazil is different from São Paulo. São Paulo has a very specific accent as well. Use of words. Brazil is so large, and culturally speaking, it changes so much. Food changes so much. The type of music that we enjoy, that we grew up listening, the geography changes absolutely so much as well. Like most people, I don't know every single corner of the country because it is unfortunately, it's expensive to travel within Brazil. And it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time to, like, very little people actually have been to many different states. I had lucky to travel around a little bit, and I was personally surprised with like how different everything is. And São Paulo kind of gets a little bit of everything. I feel like it's a very good place to have, for instance, flavors from multiple parts of the country. You listen to multiple accents within Portuguese all the time. It's like the UK, but multiplied by 100. Whereas you have like all the, like, England has its own accents, and then you add the different accents from within Ireland, from within like Scotland, Wales, but then you multiply it for more. It's kind of you're walking around the EU talking the same language.
It's
definitely a gorgeous
like
place.
Interesting country to visit for sure. And
I'm feeling like I'm doing advertising for the tourism in Brazil now.
No, you made me curious. I will need to at least look at photos of Sao Paulo and Rio as well to see some differences, and also to check the map. But if you can do one more comparison, how would you compare it to actually capital city Brasilia?
Oh, you know what? I've been to Brasilia only once, and I was very young. I don't have much recollection of it. I remember being a very dry place. Incredibly dry at that time that I visited. I think I was about 16 years old, 16, 17. I don't know how it is now. Brazil is a full-on, like, it was a planned city, I believe. I believe that the main part, the political capital is Brasilia, right? That's where the president is and everything. And it was planned to be in that location for military purposes and things like that. It's far away from the shore and all those things. I believe that then there's a city that grows around that to provide services and things like that. I don't know how well planned that is, but I would say that is a different experience as well. I don't know how that is now, to be honest. Unfortunately, I cannot give you my full perspective.
No worries. You sold us the country already.
No, I thought you feel like there's honestly there's too many places to go here. Like I know a little bit more going towards south, a little bit around São Paulo, a couple of places in the north. My father, he lives in the north. I haven't visited him yet. But you also have like Amazonas and like states around that area. It's still like I haven't been to many of those areas as well. I've done like a quick shooting over 15 years, 17 years ago in the Amazons, but it was only 3 days, and it was like so muggy, so hot, incredibly hot, so many flies. I couldn't sleep. It was
I believe
awesome.
If you want to boost your online presence, check out our digital marketing agency called Trailblazed. You can also enroll in our Skillshare course called The 10 Tips on How to Succeed in Your Creative Career, which was inspired by the podcast. Lastly, make sure to subscribe to our weekly newsletter called Creative Spotlight to stay up to date with the show and more. Links are in the show notes. Thanks.
Before we move out of this geographical window, if you were to share one favorite site to see or visit in Brazil or place or something for
no,
tourists, what would that be?
I don't have one. I don't have one. It's hard. It's a hard one. I would say if you like beaches, stick with the north. I prefer
Mhm.
the beaches that you will have like north, including like Rio de Janeiro. Like it's a very nice place, but the beaches at north, you can have more variety. If you want to eat, Minas Gerais is an amazing place. São Paulo will have food from there as well.
Mhm.
But I don't know. Like there's so many great places to go. Yeah, unfortunately, it's just too big, man, to decide. You know,
I understand. No worries.
choose my favorite movie. There are too
Mhm.
many movies
Yeah.
to be favorites. That I don't like that question.
No, no worries, no worries. So then, coming back to your education, um, when did you decide to pursue your career of someone who's working in film or VFX industry? When was it?
Yeah, I mean, I always enjoy like cartoons, growing up watching cartoons, right? And then we had something here in the high school. You can choose at the time. You could choose. I don't know if they still have this. You could choose to do the high school and also pursue a technical career. And I chose advertising.
Hmm.
So that was my first contact with some of the stuff, creation of image, kind of trying to get a little bit of a very simple base of marketing, advertising, and I really enjoyed it. But I would say that the day that defined that I really, really wanted to work in movies was when I watched Beauty and the Beast in the movie theaters.
Was that the,
When that was
I guess,
released, I remember like,
animation, right? Animated.
yeah, that was a 2D Walt Disney, all that stuff. I remember that my parents, they didn't usually have the money to go for the movies with me. So my neighbor, she had a kid that was quite friends with me and my brother, and she offered to bring us to the movie theater.
Mm.
And it was like this the first time I've been to the movie theater, and it was like love at first sight, like the whole experience, sitting in the dark, the smell of popcorn, like the big lights coming from the screen and all that fun. And that was like absolutely, I was hooked. It was like honestly the most intense drug I've ever done in my life.
Yeah.
It was like absolutely amazing, and that kind of got me thinking into drawing. So I started drawing as well. Started painting. I have my grandmother used to paint. I have an auntie that paints quite wonderfully as well. And then every time I would visit them, we would draw, paint, and then I grew up having a little bit of that. And then I started working. Coincidentally, that school, the high school, they had like a design company, and they were hiring. So I got my first job when I was around like 13, 14 years old.
Mhm.
So I started working with them. I started working in Photoshop and that kind of stuff. That was kind of my first experience with images.
Mhm.
Um, and then I moved from that place into merchandising. Who was when my mom was doing psychology, she had a colleague, and he needed someone to do visualization of the products that he was trying to sell for PDVs.
Mhm.
So I pretty much kind of got hired, and that was the first time I had contact with 3D, because he paid me a course to learn 3D Max and things like that. Actually, it wasn't the first. My first was I tried to learn by myself, but it was just too complicated at the time.
Yeah.
And then he paid a course. I went to the course, and then I started meeting more people that also work with 3D. And then after a little while, I got hired by a bureau of design. And that's when things started to become a little bit more serious for me. That was already like 6 years down the road.
Mhm.
But the owners of that place, they were two artists. They were plastic artists, and they started kind of help me to see what I wanted to do. I've always knew I wanted to work in cinema, but Brazil, it was a very hard place to start working. I always wanted to do like visual effects, special effects. I want to work with animation. At that time, it was still quite small or quite focused in advertising. And I never actually thought about going abroad at that time yet. And then we were talking after a few years. We were quite close. I was one of the oldest employees in the place as well. And they finally asked me. I postponed going to university for about 4 years because I had to work to help at home as well. And at some point I was like, okay, everyone's okay. Like I can start thinking about my future a little bit more with time.
Yeah.
And then I was talking to them. They're like, hey, why don't you just do photography? Like it's just across from the office. It was literally the same, like just walking across the street. I will be at the university. It was one of the best programs in Brazil. It's a university called Senac. I used to work in a neighborhood called Lapa. It was a very interesting neighborhood. And I was like, you know what? Let me try a couple of things. I've always wanted to do philosophy. So I did a test to enter university to do philosophy, and I tried photography. I passed both, but I ended up choosing photography because it was more practical. Like I could see a future a little bit more easy with that, which was something narrow-minded for me at that time. I didn't understand all the potential everywhere, and I feel like it was also a language that I was more used to. And that was the first time that I actually started studying and get formal education when it comes to image. And it was awesome. It was honestly, I have plenty of great memories, and I was extremely happy. I've always enjoyed studying. Always. I've always enjoyed learning something. Since I was young, I like the frustration of learning to a certain extent. And I find it learning one of the most addictive things to be doing, like regardless of what it is.
Do you have still such mindset now?
Yeah, I do. I'm actually feeling a little bit. It's one of the things that I'm trying to plan what's going to be the next thing for me to study, right? I like to learn different things as well. But we're going to go back to that. Let me just, I don't want to lose my line of thought because my brain works in scattered away. So, so I did 2 years of photography, and I loved it. I loved it, every single ounce of it. I remember going to the black and white lab to review. My time was a transition time towards digital photography, and my class was one of the last class that was pretty much analog photography. So I went to the labs. We will review the film in the black and the dark room, and it was fun. It was like, yeah. And it was also really nice because it was the first time that I was actually exposed to my class had about 40 to 50 people, and 40 to 50 people of extremely different lines of thoughts. It's the kind of thing that I feel like the university is still worth going to. You're exposed to different mindsets, different things, different backgrounds, different cultures, different styles, and it was really mind-blowing seeing all those things. It was very fun. But at the end of the second year of photography, I still felt like it wasn't 100% what I wanted. I've always missed the animation part of it. And at that time, I was doing freelancing with a guy that was doing a program at this new school. And that school was kind of like a kind of escape studios. It is in London, Vancouver Film School. It is in Canada. They teach you 3D from the base, and then you could do a short film as your
project,
as your final project. And then I started saving money as much as I could at the time, and then I started doing the program. I put a pause on the university. I started doing the program. I remember that I actually paid a little bit less, because it was that time that you need to write down a check, right? And then I cried out for a discount, and then the guy gave me the value, and then I took a little bit more when I wrote down all the 12 checks, and I was like, I don't have the 12 checks anymore. I'm gonna have to wait. Can we just? And he was really nice. It was okay. The financial department was okay with it. It wasn't that much, but at that time for me it was a lot. Like 25 in a currency at that time was like, I remember that I had to choose one meal that I wouldn't have for the first 6 months. So I would always have my breakfast, and then I would have to choose between having like dinner or lunch. Even meal prepping would be hard. It was a tough moment because my mom was having issues, my brother was having issues as well. So financially, it was kind of like, okay, let me play with this. I start taking some credit debts with the bank as well, which put me a little bit. It was a risky investment, but it was also really nice. Like the school was amazing. The people, I still do consultants work with the school. I still, including today, I'm going to the school after talking to you just to see the people. I'm very close friends with all of them.
Actually, the same one.
Yeah, it's still the same one. Yeah, they're still up and going. The school became a university now after all this journey in time. Yeah, it's called Méliès. It's really nice. They change a lot of things in Brazil when it comes to like visual effects and CG. A lot of people came from different states in Brazil to that school as well, which was awesome. And I was one of them. So I was in a class with a lot of people that they were risking a lot of things like I was risking, like a lot of people, because it is expensive for the nature of what it is. So a lot of people were kind of like taking a lot of chances. And I was studying at night because I was still working. In Brazil, it's very traditional to work full time and then do university. So I would work from usually, I don't know, 8 to 6, and then go to the school, study from 7 to 10, and then go back home, do homework, wake up even early. I would wake up earlier around like 4 a.m., then go to work and try to study before work started as well. So I was like, for about a year, I was pretty much sleeping like 3 hours, 4 hours a night, and then studying during the weekends. There was a moment that I had to do something. I didn't have all that money. So at some point I had like 3 freelances plus work, plus the program, and trying to have a little bit of a life, which I didn't. It was very convoluted, but it was very energetic. It was very, I feel like I had the right mindset to go through that at that time. There are a couple of issues. I feel like I sacrificed a lot at that time. Some things I didn't have to, but I also didn't have the vision, the perspective to understand what I was sacrificing. But it worked. The school actually, at the time I finished my program, a couple of months after, they invited me for an interview, and they want me to become an instructor at the school.
Once you finished, just shortly afterwards?
Shortly after. It's pretty much for lighting, look dev, render comp. I got along quite well with one of the partners, Rafael, who's a dear friend, extremely talented person as well. And he saw potential in me, and he suggested to hire me. I went there, we talked, and it just worked. And then after that, it was a intense journey. That was my first official into visual effects world kind of job. That was the first time after I was already working for probably 9-10 years. And then I got into the school, and it was awesome. It was great. It was everything I could want. I was working my ass off, but with something that it had that amazing value. After a couple of years, I decided to go back to school to finish university. So I was teaching full time, and then I went back to school. I got my diploma. It was bittersweet because when I went back to university, it was 1 year after my class had graduated. So I couldn't say goodbye to them that properly. But I also got to know a lot of new people as well, which was fun. But it was a different condition because I was only studying a couple of classes here and there, and I was just kind of like that student that would show up for like 3 times a week.
Yeah.
But once I graduated, I was very much happy. Then the school moved to a different neighborhood. The school started growing. I started picking up more responsibility because I just loved. Like I understood that I really enjoyed teaching as well. It was something that it really got to me. I wasn't expecting that, but it was really, really, really fun. I love teaching. I'm not gonna say that I was a great teacher because I feel like as I was too young, I didn't have the proper thing. You know, like I had my personality that was very different. I was a very rough person because of the way I was working. I grew up working in a harsh environment. So I'm not gonna say that I was the most sensitive person as well. I didn't know how to motivate properly, you know. But after a few years teaching, the people that worked with me were helping, giving feedback. Some students confronting me, also helping me grow, you know. And I feel like after 6-7 years, I actually became a decent instructor at that time. But it was still starting to miss something. So I decided to keep studying. And after photography, I really remember falling in love with art history. I had this teacher, this professor, and she was like amazing, the love of my life. She like, her classes were just like so goddamn awesome, you know? It's just like one of those classes that you would start listening to someone and you will be done and you feel like time didn't existed. And I remember like if I go back to school, because school is tiring, you know, it's always tiring because you're working, it's always tiring. Like if I go back to school, I want to try to study more art history. So I found this diploma program, which was art history, theory, and critics. And I feel like I hit the nail right on the spot at that time because it was another amazing experience. It was just a 2-year program. It was a lot of theory, but involved so much more than what I was expecting. It was like, it talked about philosophy, sociology, economies, and how that shaped the world and certain countries in order to give the right ground for some art movements to actually like emerge. So it was like really deep dive into culture, mindsets, philosophy. It was really, really, really interesting, and I absolutely loved it. With everything, like I wouldn't, to a certain point, I wouldn't even get that much tired because it was just fun. It got a little bit more tiring when I had to do my thesis itself, but I found out my way of doing the thesis, the perfect environment for me to study, which was the movie theater. So I would do, I would do 3 times a week. I will go to the movie theater. I will buy a large popcorn and a pop, and then I will sit down, read my books at the waiting room for the movie. So I would get there, buy the ticket for a movie for like 3 hours after, and then I would just sit down studying, and then boom, close the book, close my notepad, and then go watch a movie, get out of there. And if it was a weekend, I would do that twice. I would go, right, study, watch a movie, finish the movie, come back, study more, and watch another movie. I would spend like pretty much like the entire weekend going to the movie theater. I would watch the same movie sometimes twice, you know.
It's like a perfect
and I felt like that was a
environment.
really nice way. Yeah, and it was interesting because I don't usually like studying with people around me, but in that context, like looking at the lineups, kind of going through, looking at the couples, looking at people with dates, like people with kids, you know, around, it kind of just felt like so positive environment that it kind of just worked for me. So I kept studying, you know, like even the people from the movie theater, like they already knew my name. You know, it's
it's
it was
him
like,
again, Fernando.
yeah, pretty much. That's the the weird guy that comes in right down and goes to the movies twice a day. Yeah, and it was really nice. The people that I met at the program they were also amazing. And that was an interesting one because we started the class with about 20, 30 people, but like every semester people were dropping because it wasn't what they were looking for, you know. It was also interesting to see like people goals and objectives when it comes to that. And to be honest, I feel like photography gave me a lot of base to discuss photography and that part of what we call art. But that diploma itself gave me a much broader array of tools to talk about writing, paintings, photograph, like sculpt and performative arts. And yeah, it was just really, really nice. And after I was done that, I thought about following a academic career. That was for about like, after I was done with my thesis, I was like, no, that's what I want to do. Like, it was so much love doing that, you know, that I decided that I wanted to do that. And then after a little while, I had a couple of people from the school that moved to Canada to pursue a career in visual effects in Canada. Oh. And at that time, things were much better. Yeah, and that time things were much better at home. My mom was like very like well in her career as well. My brother was doing well. My father was like doing well as well at his own place. And I think that I got like two kind of lines of thought, like, and for a couple of years I had like, okay, Fernando, you're gonna stay in Brazil and you can pursue this more academic side of things while still pushing little by little what you know in visual effects, or you can kind of try to go and fulfill that dream you had, like you go to Canada and you try to pursue that dream and see what's up with that. And I feel like after a couple of years seeing people, I didn't want to make a decision at that level right after my thesis because I was so in love with art history and things like that I knew that I was going to be very biased. So I kind of waited a little bit, put that in practice. I start coming up with my own classes. I start teaching in university as well for a year. And okay, so this is academic life. It has its good, it has its bad, you know, like this is, and what do you want to do? I pretty much kind of flipped a coin on the decision, you know, because I was very much like 50-50 split. But I was like, look, Fernando, you've been living in Brazil all your life. You know, you've been speaking Portuguese all your life. You've been talking about traveling abroad. You never experienced anything. Go for a year, and after a year, you see what happens. You know, I spoke with the people at the school. I spoke with a lot of people. Like, hey, yeah, if you come back, we will receive you back with open arms. Just if you come back. And kind of pretty much I was like, you know what, let's just do this. And then I pretty much went with the idea of going to Canada. I researched going to Ireland. I researched going to other places. But Canada was, at that time in 2013, 14, it was the most financially doable for me as well. I didn't have that much money to go there with. So I pretty much went there, like just close my eyes, pay for the English course. So the visa that I went there was like a study work visa. So I had to study first, and then after 9 months of study, I will get like a 9 months or 12 months work visa. So that would be like 2 years. So the first year pretty much studying, the second year pretty much working, and then done. I will have to find someone to sponsor, or I will come back to Brazil. So I was like, you know what? That's a nice experience. Screw it. Let's do it. So I then paid the program, went to Canada, and I stayed there for 10 years after that. It was
more than
love at first sight.
Expected.
Yeah, I went to Vancouver, which is the west coast in Canada. It's a lovely place. It's quite different from what it used to be. But it was amazing, and I started studying English. I feel lucky that I had people to support me there as well. My friends that were there, that I knew from the school, Marcelo, Rafael, Marcelo's wife, Biba, like they helped me so much in my first couple of weeks. And I feel very, very lucky, and I treasure them like for the rest of my life, because I do find that is a very, I could see when I was alone the weight of being alone, but also I knew that I had people that I could count on around me, and that just grows my admiration for the people who take that opportunity by themselves, and people who get there escaping from something horrible that they have back home. You know, it definitely. I was lucky enough to have had the choice of going instead of being forced going. You know, it definitely puts it in perspective. And the English school that I study, we dealt with a lot of like refugees as well. You had people from various different countries, and it was really, really nice. Like it was kind of weird being a student full time, you know, but it was also kind of like really nice. I didn't have enough money to be a student full time, so I kind of had to find a job before time. And I tried finding a job in my area, but it didn't work because you kind of need to be there 8 hours a day. And I was studying until until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So pretty much you're studying English full time. Which was amazing. Like my English improved so much then. It was really, really cool. Like there's nothing like being there, you know. I remember asking for information to get the bus, and I couldn't communicate that properly. And like after 1 week, I was already asking for directions. It was and the teachers there were amazing as well. But I started looking for a job, couldn't find it, and then there was a person inside the school that had a friend that worked in a restaurant, and they were looking for dishwashers. So I went there for an interview. A beautiful location. It's called Canada Place. There's a pub called Mahoney and Sons. I believe they're still open. And I work at the Mahoney and Sons for 6 to 9 months. I don't fully recall how long I worked there for. But I worked from dishwashing for like 4 months. Then I worked in the kitchen itself. It was a very rough experience. It's very hard work. Like standing up for a full like 8 hour, 10 hours or 12 hours, you know, like it was rough on the knee. I remember like spilling hot oil on my feet while doing oil exchange. The rhythm of a kitchen is insane as well, right? Like, but it was also a great place. I made like great friends in the kitchen. I had to force my English to get much better because I was working with not only Canadians, but with Irish people, Scottish people. And I couldn't understand the different accents at that time. You know, like my brain was like, that doesn't even sound like English somehow. And I couldn't communicate because they couldn't understand me because I had a really extremely heavy accent as well. But it was really good. Like I worked with so many people from so many different backgrounds, from being in prison to like being the first job of their lives when they're 16 years old. You know, my first supervisor had 19 years old, or I don't know, like, and then you have like people, different ways of managing. You know, it was my first experience, absolutely different from what I used to do. And it was also like ego wise at that time. It was, even though I understood what I was doing for the time what I was doing, it was hard leaving the position I had before and then like be in a position in which like it was so hardcore work. I thought that I was past that phase of my life, but no, you know. So kind of I knew that was the case and that it was just a moment. But even though you know that that's just a moment, going through those seconds and those minutes was very tough. But I was rewarded by the city, to be honest, because I would leave the kitchen, I don't know, like in the afternoon or at night, like 1 a.m. or 12 o'clock, and I will walk outside and see the ocean and see the lights in the mountain, you know, get the smell of fresh air, like actual fresh air. You know, like one thing that London and São Paulo have in common is the terrible air quality.
I was gonna say not like in central London.
No, definitely not like central London. The beautiful smell of puking city.
Mm.
But I would say that, yeah, it was still very much worth it. I remember like I would leave the place. It was tough. But it was worth it. Every single day was definitely worth it. It was fun. The people working were amazing,
Mm-hmm.
And then I had a problem with the tendinitis. I had an inflammation on my tendon, and then I couldn't cook anymore because at that time I was moving. I was kind of moving to different stations in the kitchen, and I was finally cooking on the pan. It was fun. I was learning. It was actually really fun, and I developed this inflammation on a tendon, and then I lost this curvature on the hand,
Oh,
and I couldn't work in the kitchen anymore. Yeah, it was a
oh
very
my God.
tough time.
And how
So I
does
had to
that happen,
find
or
different
why did
doctors.
that happen?
There's repetitive use, wrong use, like it's like too many years working in the computer, then plus adding the repetitive movement of the weight, because you have like risotto and you're cooking
Yeah.
like 5-7 risotto. I don't know,
Mhm.
like 20 minutes. Like not fine dining level. So
Mhm.
you have a lot of prep stuff, and you need to do things are heavy, and then you're moving, you're chopping things. A lot of repetitive movements, and I
You need to
wasn't
switch hands.
professional.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want that. You don't want me cutting stuff with my left hand.
No, I
And
feel the
because I
same.
wasn't, I was learning what I was doing, so I was committing a lot of mistakes as well, right?
Mhm.
So I was holding the knife wrong, and then I had to be corrected. People had a lot of patience, but like it takes some time for you to learn that. And
Mhm.
I developed that within the year. And then I had to take a break. I stopped it. At that time, I was also in a very good relationship. And then I had someone to support me while I was not necessarily working. And I still had some money that I was saving from working. Coincidentally, it was also the time in which I was able to start looking for a proper job. It was kind of things were aligning. Then I found a nice doctor as expensive doctor, but very competent doctor to help me cure it with the thing. And then things kind of just aligned. I was getting better from my hand, and I could apply for a job. And some friends recommended to a company. And
Mhm.
then I got my first gig in visual effects after a year and 2 months. A year, 3 months. I actually had an experience in an architectural company. For a couple of months. It didn't work out that
Mhm.
well. People were awesome, but just the type of work wasn't necessarily aligned. And the guy that hired me, he left to start his own company. So I kind of had a little bit less motivation to stay at the place. Um, but after 2-3 months, we talked. We all agreed that it wouldn't work. It wasn't the fit that we all thought it would be. And then I got this job aligned at this place called Bardell. They're still open to do amazing things. And that was the first time that I had a, a step on visual effects animation abroad. And
And were you still
I
studying at the
started as a
time?
junior. No, my English program was done. I was fully on into my work visa.
Mhm.
So that was awesome. It gave me the freedom to kind of have a lot of interviews, and it was also really fun because I never been to so many interviews in my life. It was very interesting because in Brazil at that time I would do interviews. I would go through a lot of interviews, but the interviews, I don't know, because I was working at the school for so long. It was like almost 10 years working at that school. So I was absolutely out of practice when it comes
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
interviews. And then I got to Canada, and then I got like the kitchen interviews. They were not that complicated. But then when I started heading to the interviews for visual effects and talking to people, oh, I need to prepare me better for here and there. And yeah, like I remember that there were a couple of months I had like about 6 interviews, and I was like, holy crap, 6 interviews. And I got lucky that I had one of them was a good fit. They were growing. I remember that at the time that they were working on the King Julien. It was a TV show spin off from the Madagascar. Madagascar, yeah, one of those movies from DreamWorks. It was really fun. It was nice.
Oh,
The people
remind
were
me
amazing.
what was it called again? King.
King Julien is on Netflix. I believe. I think so.
So
yeah.
is that about that little monkey-like animal?
Yeah, I forgot that the breed, the animal. Yeah, but it's that one. Yeah, it was super fun. This entire.
I know just what it is called in my native language, but don't know English. But it's very funny.
Yeah, I know what it's called in Portuguese, but it's fun.
Yeah,
it was super fun. Lemur?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh yeah, that's correct. Lemur.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But it was super fun, and it was the first time that I was exposed to a pipeline, the procedures, how complex and how many departments there are, production departments, and then I had to report to my leads. The lead had to report to his supervisor, and then we were talking to the editor because hey, there's like a continuity, and like, oh my god, continuity, that's true. I also need to do that. And it was fun, like working with a lot of extremely smart people, young people, and that's kind of where I started. And then I had and that was a contract, I believe at the time was 9 months. I was still very much not used to contract work. Coming from Brazil, we are used to like permanent positions. At that time, definitely like contract work wasn't that much. I feel like nowadays is a little bit more. I was not used to the whole instability of have contract and how to plan for that. But after 9 months, my contract was almost done, and I got an offer that gave me more money. It was pretty much because of the money that I left, because I needed to kind of start to create some. I needed to start having a little more financial peace at that point. So I kind of figured that I needed to invest on that for the year. And because if I was supposed to go back to Brazil or not, I kind of needed the money as well. So,
yeah.
So I changed to Icon, which is a company that still works. They do amazing work as well. Again, usually awesome people, talented and everything. And then we worked on the first Latin Disney princess. I got hired to work on the Elena of Avalor. I think that they're done with that show already. It might be on Disney Plus or things like that.
Yeah.
And it was super fun as well. A lot of work because they were changing to Renderman. They used to work with Arnold. It was like this whole thing, but it was fun. We had a few nights that we kind of worked late. That was a little bit tough, but it was still very nice.
What was your position at that time?
I was still I was a lighter in comper at that time.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast app, get in touch to provide your feedback, or share any ideas for future guests. Thank you and see you soon.